So welcome back, everybody. If I could encourage you to take your seats, Eddie. Thank you. Thanks very much. So welcome back, everybody, to the third of our de-risking sessions. This panel, as you will have seen from the programme, is de-risking funding, and we have the Chief Operating Officer from F-Star with a wealth of experience. She's a veteran at Bayer. My jaw drops to see how much she networks and how brilliantly she does her job on a daily basis. It's our huge pleasure to have her here, and so I'd like to hand over now to Jane Dancer from F-Star. Jane.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Thank you. There's a lot of things I love about this conference. I love the venue. I love it even more the way that the centre's been refurbished. It's fabulous. I love the ice cream, the free ice cream. I usually love the weather. I've not loved it quite so much today, but I did like the lady that lent me an umbrella, for those of you that are here at lunchtime, when it decided to pour down when we had to get from this building over to the restaurant. So thank you to One Nucleus for fielding the umbrellas. But the thing that I love most about this conference is it's a real melting pot of science and business, and it's not often you get people from all different disciplines together, and I think that's really part of the secret of good translation. And I think Harriet at the beginning said that their aim was to be thought-provoking, and I think by bringing people together to listen to things that we might not normally think about, I mean, that really does stimulate us to use our brain cells. So in this last session, we're moving the focus now from collaboration and data, from more of the science across to the business, as someone referred to us earlier, to the dark side. And I've only got one slide, a bit like Jeff. The title of our session is going to be De-risking Funding, Investing in Early Stages of Development. And since I've got one slide, I'll just work it a bit and say that when I was talking to the panel in preparing for this, I think if you look at de-risking funding, you can look at it almost in two ways. One is you can think about how these guys who have to make very risky investment decisions can actually mitigate the risk associated with that. And the other is, are there actually funding strategies which will help us to de-risk the science itself? So the ways in which we can fund that will actually mitigate the risk there. And I think in this session, I'm hoping we're going to touch on both of this. And to do that, we've got a very experienced set of panelists, all of them people who are professionals involved in making investment decisions. And I'm going to ask each of them obviously to come up, do a presentation. I'll take a few questions actually after each of their talks, and then we'll have the panel at the end. So first up, I'd like to introduce Eric Karran. So a few words about Eric. He's Director of Research at Alzheimer's Research UK. And like many of our panellists, he's actually spent a significant amount of his career working in big pharma, and where he held a number of senior positions and did a lot of research in dementia. And he moved to Alzheimer's Research UK in 2012. I don't know if any of you, like me, were listening to the Today programme yesterday morning. Yes, Eric, I'm going to embarrass you now. But those of you that did will have heard they had an article about the 1946 cohort study where Eric was interviewed. So he's come to us from the Today programme, which is quite a coup. But without more ado, I'd like to invite Eric up to give his talk. Thank you.
Well, my first advice is that Jane needs to get a more active life if she's listening to me on the radio.
I was on the way to work.
Oh, okay, that's acceptable. And just a little bit about the 46 cohort, although this didn't come out in the piece in the Today programme, AR UK are actually funding that with £3 million, so that's a huge investment for us. So what I'm going to talk about here is de-risking research. Of course, all research is intrinsically risky, and that's actually what makes it interesting in my view as well. But there is a role, I think, for the charitable sector to try and, in a sense, de-risk some early targets, which we think will make the landscape for work in neuroscience slightly more attractive to those who can really bring medicines to people. Okay, so this slide basically shows you where clinical development was in 2010, and in the centre of this target are the phase 4 molecules that are licensed and marketed, many of them for Alzheimer's disease, and then in the concentric circles from that centre you have phase 3, phase 2, phase 1 and preclinical. And if we fast forward to where we are now, all of those in the centre have actually died, except one. and I have to declare an interest. I worked on solanezumab when I was at Lilly. Solanezumab is now in its third phase 3 study in mild AD. So I think this tells you that this is intrinsically very, very difficult. And this is the scorecard in Alzheimer's disease, looking back over about a decade. Those are the number of drugs that have been into clinical trials from phase 1 through to phase 3, and the success rate has been 0.6% over that period. So there's been a colossal amount of investment in trying to bring molecules to man, and unfortunately none of them has actually succeeded to date. And as a consequence, I think from that record of lack of success, I hesitate to use the word failure because I think we learn something from each trial. This really shows where we are in terms of drug approvals, and I think there has been a retreat of pharma from neuroscience and from dementia research in particular. And of course, there's no right or wrong about this, because for a failed phase 3 in Alzheimer's disease, a particular company might have had 3 phase 3 successes in oncology for that amount of money and brought much needed relief to those patients. So there's always a cost of failure. And not only are patients in that have Alzheimer's disease and dementia important, patients across the world in all therapeutic areas are very important, and I'm not going to trade one disease off for another. But you can see that neurology just represents around 7% of these in 2013, and this is oncology and inflammation, which are where the bulk of the success has been. And this is a figure taken from a recent paper in Neuron, which shows that approximately somewhere between 50 and 60% of all neuroscience programs in big pharma have been terminated, I think, as a consequence of the challenges that pharma have faced. And clearly, as a charity, our mission is to try and accelerate novel science to patient benefit as rapidly as we can. And this is a situation that we're certainly not pleased about, although I think there's a good deal of understanding about why this is the case. And we'd like to do something about it if we possibly can. And really, the retreat has been because it's just very, very difficult. And this was an analysis published in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery in 2013 at really quite a large cohort of drugs that had reached clinical development. And it was an assessment of what correlated with success and failure. And amazingly, the only therapeutic area that correlated significantly was neuroscience. Unfortunately, it correlated with failure in a statistically significant manner. So it doesn't cross the line here. Infectious disease correlated with success. And the thing that is also, I think, important, though, is when you try and make an assessment of scientific quality, that also seems to correlate with success. So the message here is that, yes, this is incredibly challenging, but actually, if you do very high-quality science over time, you will have success. I guess that's stating the obvious, but it's nice to see it examined in this way. So having talked about the tremendous amount of failure that we've seen in the neuroscience area, and which we all regret, of course, where exactly do the drugs come from? And this was an analysis, again, Nature Reviews Drug Discovery 2014, which looked at drugs and looked at their provenance. Where did they originate from? And what really struck me about this when I saw it is that 18%, nearly a fifth of all drugs that get launched originate from not-for-profit organisations, which I was very surprised at. But I thought, as a charity, this is an area that we can advance. This is something that's within our scope to do something about, and I always like to do sort of a thorough analysis of situations before I enter them, and this to me showed me that actually it can be successful. And does size or geography matter? Another important point. Actually, the answer to that is no. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't really matter who you are. And we've seen the previous analysis, which basically said that high-quality science is significantly correlated with success in drug discovery. So again, this was reassuring to me that this was something that AI UK could participate in. So what really we wanted to do, and I think what will help bring back pharma and other parties to the table in terms of working in this area, because patients need these drugs, is to improve the target landscape in terms of de-risking research. And if you compare the number of viable targets, tractable targets in neuroscience and in dementia in particular, it really just does not compare with oncology and with diabetes for a whole host of reasons, and also actually for inflammation. And I think ultimately this is basically due to the low level of investment in research over the last 20 or 30 years. And ARUK certainly supports the research base. If you look at the number of papers published in the UK that has ARUK funding, it's about equal to that of the Wellcome Trust, and about 2/3 of that of the MRC. So we are a significant player in this area, certainly in the UK. But our real mission actually is to make a difference for patients. That's what we're here for, and I guess ultimately my job is to make myself and everyone at ARUK redundant, because we have great drugs for neurodegenerative diseases and there is no need for a charity anymore. I wish that would happen, but I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I'm just going to talk about 2 examples where we are putting our money where my mouth is anyway, in terms of trying to make a difference for patients in this very difficult area. And that's the ARUK Drug Discovery Institutes and the Dementia Consortium. There are others, but I think time forbids me to talk about those. In terms of my long career actually in pharma, I identified 4 relatively simple attributes that you really needed for success. You have to get smart people, you need to give them resource, you need to give them stable funding, you set them a relatively clear mission, which is go and do science and cure Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease or diabetes, and then you have to leave them to get on with the job. And actually, the pressure that pharma is under at the moment, it is incredibly difficult to set those 4 parameters and leave them be, because there is significant churn as pharma, I think, wrestles with a new model and new ways of paying for drugs. And certainly, when I looked back on my last decade in pharma, the longest that I had gone without a significant reorganisational change of focus was 2 years in that previous 10-year period. And that really isn't a good foundation for getting deep into biology and discovering drugs. So if we're going to do it as a charity, we want to try and do all of these things. Of course, this doesn't guarantee success, but it sets the conditions for success. The other thing you need, and sometimes this is tricky if you're in a big organisation, is access to excellent scientists that are working in academia, that really know disease mechanisms, that have operated in those disease mechanisms maybe for 20 years. Getting access to clinicians who know the disease, treat patients, and access to patients and patient material. Again, this is the sort of penumbra of science that you really need around drug discovery, I think, to make it work. And so we launched, and I'll come on to where they are, a call and a funding stream for drug discovery institutes with certain parameters. They were that we're not going to actually build anything, we can't afford it. The host institution would have to be a recognised centre of excellence in neurodegenerative disease with a great environment. The scientists that would go into the Drug Discovery Institute would be excellent scientists so far as translation of biology and chemistry is concerned. So they wouldn't be academic scientists as such. They would be people probably ex-pharma. The institute would be fully integrated, and we selected 3 institutes to host one of these after a competitive call, which received 6 applications in total. And so we now have the Drug Discovery Alliance, and the 3 institutions we're hosting these institutes in is Cambridge, Oxford, and University College London, which, depending on how you look at the metrics, are 3 of the top 5 institutes in the world for neuroscience research. That was the Memorandum of Understanding. That was a 4-way confidentiality agreement so that those 3 institutions in ARUK could discuss pre-publication and pre-patent science. That was the final agreement. That was the advert we put into Nature to hire 3 chief scientific officers, and those chief scientific officers are now appointed, and we're going to be funding this to the tune of £30 million over the next 5 years. But we also believe that these, because they are pretty extraordinary beasts, are going to attract and accrue funding from other sources. That, at least, is our hope. This is the way it's set up. So there is a reporting line from the CSO to the Director of Research at ARUK, who's currently me. The CSO has operational control over the Drug Discovery Institute. In each institute, that's going to be about 30 people. It's up to the CSO how they divide those 30 into chemistry and biology. And there is a lead academic scientist as well who acts as an ambassador for the DDI within the host institution. The grant was awarded to the lead PI because that was the leverage we got for them to host the institution and provide lab space. But actually the sole responsibility for spending the money resides with the Chief Scientific Officer. So by setting it up in this way, we are really very much encouraging those 2 senior figures to work cooperatively together. but the responsibilities of each are distinct, which I think is important because they're going to be doing somewhat different tasks. So that's the Drug Discovery Institutes. The other thing we've started is the Dementia Consortium, which, as you can see, is ourselves, Eisai, Lilly, and Medical Research Council Technology Group. What is it? The aim of this is to provide a mechanism for academics to get access to high-quality, pharma-standard drug discovery on early targets around the world. And the exit point for these projects are going to be either lead molecules, where there is a potential path forward to get candidates into man, or tool compounds with which to explore highly novel biology. The way it's set up is like this. AR UK providing 2 million in funding. Screening and target validation is provided by MRCT, who are our high-quality drug discovery operation with a track record of success. And each pharma company is putting in £500,000. We currently have 2. We are talking to another 4 pharma to also get their contribution. It's a pooled resource. It's incredibly flexible so that pharma can opt in and opt out of the projects that it wants to fund. And that was deliberate because I wanted to lower the threshold within pharma for them to participate. Where are we? It's been going for just over a year, I think. We've had 39 applications, so these are expressions of interest, 10 of which went through to the next stage, so that's a pretty good success rate. Of those 7 full applications, 4 are now being funded, so a 50% success rate. And I'm really incredibly excited by this because this is 4 drug discovery projects on really novel targets that would not be in any big pharma's portfolio of targets. And this science would just not be happening without our intervention. So I think this is exactly what we should be at least spending some of our money on. This call is always open, and it's open globally. And that's the breakdown of where we've had applications from. And as you can see, predominantly in the UK, but literally from around the world. So to conclude, our strategy is to accelerate novel science to patient benefit. So that's really what we want to do. It's great that we fund academics. We've managed to fund some wonderful academics and get some great science done. But that is a conduit, really, for us to get patients the drugs that they need. We've launched these 2 initiatives which we think are trying to increase the target population for neurodegenerative diseases that we hope will be taken up by other players in this area, particularly big pharma. They're similar in some respects, but also different in what they're trying to do. So the Drug Discovery Alliance, which is the Drug Discovery Institutes, is really pushing innovation from within the academic community, from within those institutions, and actually from within other academic institutions. So there is no imperative for the DDIs to only work on targets or science sourced from within the host institutions. They can be completely Catholic in their sourcing of targets. And the Dementia Consortium is really pulling innovation. So we're providing money to any institution around the world that wants to participate in this endeavour. And we will work with, and we do work with just about all parties, so long as we can use our money and leverage other people's money to accelerate effective therapies for neurodegenerative diseases. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Eric just to stay put and can take a question or two. While I'm waiting, I'll just say that as a veteran, I'm a bit short-sighted, so wave clearly, and also not very good with names. So thank you, sir.
There's 2 here.
Okay.
How do you peer review the different applications that you get prior to funding?
Which applications? Any applications?
Yeah, the applications that you then want to go and fund. Yeah. You need to triage those somehow based on some
exactly. So
metrics.
For example, with the Dementia Consortium, we first asked for more or less an expression of interest. That gets sent out to experts in the field, and we get their reports back. It also gets sent to the chair of the grant review board for AR UK for his assessment as well. And then there is a due diligence process which involves pharma, scientists, MRCT and ourselves.
Okay, and there was another question I think you spotted over there.
But just one other point on that. So if in the Dementia Consortium, if there's a project that I think is really worth funding, but for whatever reason pharma doesn't want to participate, there is also an avenue that we can just fund it ourselves.
It's Stuart Farrer from Cancer Research Technology. For the drug discovery groups that you've set up, do you have an exit point in mind for projects? So when are you looking for big pharma or biotechs to come in and partner with those projects and take them forward? Because you haven't been talking about development capability within those groups.
Yeah, it's a good question. And before I go any further, I should acknowledge the help that CR UK gave me personally when I set these up, because I visited their drug discovery units and their personnel were incredibly helpful to me because they've really pioneered this model. So I think probably a reasonable exit point is going to be a lead molecule. Because if you get a lead molecule, in my experience, you've got a 70% chance of getting a candidate ultimately. And at that point, you start to engage quite a lot of in vivo biology, which becomes expensive. But actually, the decision for this is going to reside with the chief scientific officer that we are employing to do this. So again, I'm being, I've got my own opinions on how this should be done. But, we've recruited 3 really very talented, experienced scientists in drug discovery. And it's going to be up to them to make that call. And it could well be that we reach a lead molecule and that is sufficient for us to get, within the Drug Discovery Institute, funding from elsewhere to help push that from lead to candidate. So, I think that's a reasonable exit point, but I don't think it'll be the only exit point. And I think there may well be different exit points for different molecules and different targets.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you.
Thanks.